Hey everybody, my name is Jack. I'm your TA for Pulmonary this semester. I'm super excited to be working with you all. And today I wanted to give you guys a quick tutorial on how to use Adobe XD, which is a software you'll be using to create your course projects. So Adobe XD is the software right here. It's part of the Adobe Creative Cloud desktop. This is an application that you can get off the internet. All you have to do is search up Adobe Creative Cloud on your search browser and then download it. It should be really easy. You just have to log in with your BU email. Just let me know if you have any questions about that. And so first, I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Adobe XD. So it is a prototyping software. So its purpose is to enable the user to generate working models of applications. And these applications may be implemented for public use later on, which is really cool. And it's also a really powerful software with a ton of bells and whistles. So I can't possibly go over every single function of Adobe XD today, but I'm going to try to give you as much detail as possible so you can kind of get the creative juices flowing for your project. So I'm going to open up the software just by using open right here. And then I'm going to expand it. And here is the home menu for Adobe XD. So you can see that you can create new files right here with this button, or you can check out all the different sizes of the projects that you want to create right here. So I highly recommend that you click on Web 1920 to create your project, just because most people will be using computers, and it's best to kind of streamline the projects so they all look a similar way. A really cool function of XD is you can also create applications for phones and tablets, which is really great. And then another really cool thing is you can access your recent projects right here through the home menu. So all these projects are saved on the cloud, so you can just access them super easily. Another cool thing is if you don't necessarily want to start from scratch, you can use a thing called UI kits. This is kind of just giving you a skeleton of what your project might look like, and then you can kind of build up from there instead of just starting from scratch. So it already has, backgrounds, maybe some buttons involved. But we're going to talk about some of that later. For now, we're going to start out with a project from scratch. We're going to be using Web 1920. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Web 1920, and it's going to take me to the project page. So this is what you're going to kind of be greeted with when you open up a project in XD from scratch. So you have a ton of stuff on the left, a ton of stuff on the right, and in the middle is an artboard. And this is where your content is going to be showcased. So we're going to be putting some content in there. But first, we got to get through the basics. We're going to name the file first. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and then we'll call this tutorial. And we'll hit save. And now it's constantly being saved to the cloud. So that's really helpful. You also have the option of saving as a local document if you desire. Another really cool function of Adobe XD is you can work synchronously with other people. And this is really useful for people if you are working in groups, such as with the Pulmonary project. So all you have to do is click on the Invite to Document button, and you can enter somebody's email, and then you can work on the same project from different locations and different computers. So really helpful function. I highly recommend using it when you're working with your partners. So great. So then I want to talk to you about this bar up here. This is the modes section. So we have the home button. This just takes you back to the original home menu where you were looking at the UI kits and creating new projects. So now there's the design mode. This is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. So this is where you're going to create content and manipulate it. So you have shapes, you have text boxes, you can create more artboards, and you have your libraries and layers functions. So we'll go over all of that in just a second. And then you also have your prototyping section, and this kind of tells you about the interactivities of Adobe XD, and you're going to be telling XD how you want your project to be animated. For instance, if you have a button and you have somebody click on it, what's it going to do? How is the transition going to look? And then the last mode is share. This is going to be really important because it allows you to submit your document to Dr. Allen so we can take a look at it. I have a tutorial for the sharing function on my website. But really quickly, all you have to do is set your view setting to design review so you can give you feedback, and then change the link access to anyone with the link, and then hit create link. It's going to generate a link for you really quickly. All right, so back to the design mode, because this is where we're going to create some content, and I'll show you guys a little bit about how to navigate Adobe XD. So I'm using a keyboard and mouse, and I'm on PC. So my left click is going to be used to grab things and to move things around. So, and the right click is going to be changing the options for an object. The middle mouse button is really useful because it helps. If I hold it down, it lets me grab the background and kind of move things around so I can get a view of what I'm doing. And then one last function is if I hold down the control button or command button if you're on Mac and use a scroll wheel, I can zoom out and zoom in on my project. Super useful functions, just really basic to kind of help you get started. You can also, if you're using trackpad, you can also place 2 fingers on your trackpad and move around, and you'll get the same grabbing function as the middle mouse. All right, now let's go a little bit over the tools that you have for Adobe XD. So in the design section on the left, you have the select function. So this is how you grab things. You have the rectangle. This is to create shapes, rectangles, ellipses, polygons, and lines. And then you could also have a pen and a text function. This is for creating drawings and text. And then you also have an artboard button. This is what you press if you want to create an additional artboard or an additional page to your project for transitioning. And then we also have the zoom function. So this is really helpful if you want to take a closer look at something in your project. So all you have to do is click on the zoom and highlight this area, and it'll zoom right in for you where you want. So really helpful. And then this is the libraries section. So the libraries section of Adobe XD is really important because it's where you're going to be storing a lot of your document assets. So this is, say, design-wise and stylistically-wise, where you're going to be getting a lot of your help for Adobe XD. So say if you have a certain color scheme for your project, you can save a color here. Say if you have a certain text size or font that you want to save to use at a future time, you can add it here. If you have a certain type of button that you want to keep reusing, you can save it here and implement it later on without having to go through the work of creating everything again. So we're going to be using this in real time as we go through and create content. All right, and then on the right is all of the possible options that you can use to customize something that's highlighted. So, oops, sorry, I'm in the function, I'm in the zoom function. So say I'm in the pointer section, everything is grayed out, but as soon as I highlight an object, it gives me all these options such as the positioning of objects, layout, scrolling, appearance, and whatnot. So I can customize any object that I have highlighted on the right. And we'll go over some of those functions too. So to start off, I'm going to create some content. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So to start off, I want to kind of create a theme for my project instead of just having white artboards. So I have a couple of options here. I can either choose a fill for my background. So I would generally recommend using lighter colors. You can change kind of the color here, and then you can change the hue here. I would recommend using a lighter scheme, but personally, I just decided that I wanted to get something off the internet for my background. So I'm going to pull up my pictures library here and grab my background and drag it into Adobe XD. And I'm going to throw it right on top of my artboard. If something isn't exactly aligned, you can use these aligning functions on the right. So you can align vertically and align horizontally to get it right in the middle of your project artboard. So here's my background, really nice. And then what I want to do is create a title for my artboard. So I'm going to generate some text and I'm going to say a little about me. Okay. That's way too small. So I'm first going to change the color. So I'm going to make it say white. And then I'm also going to change the text size to 120, and I'm going to change it to a font that I like. I've really been enjoying using the classic comic font, so I'm going to also center it and change the type. You're going to get used to these functions later, and then I can move my text box anywhere I want by utilizing the select function. So I'm going to put it right in the middle there at the top. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure everything is named properly. So I'm going to run over to the layers section, and I'm going to take a look at Web 1920, and I'm going to, it doesn't quite reflect what I want. So I'm going to rename it to home, because this is going to be my home, and you can see that that changed names. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take a look at my background. It's called background, great. And I'm going to make it a component. So I'm going to have it highlighted, click on object, make component. So that way it is saved to my libraries and components section so I can use it later on, and that'll come back into handy. But for now, what I want to do is I want to create what's called a basic button. So I'm going to create one rectangle here. Okay, and this is what a button is, what's going to be used to take me to a different artboard once I create one. So this will become relevant in just a second. But what I'm going to do is make this a component also. So object, make component. And let's say I want to customize my button a little bit. I'm going to add a hover state here. So this is going to allow you to have some interactivity with your button. So it kind of changes when you hover over it with your mouse. So we have a default state. And now for the hover state, I think I'm just going to round off the edges to make it a little bit more interactive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and then I'm going to drag these corners in to round off the edges of my rectangle. So now we have a default state with edges and a hover state without edges. Okay. And now I'm going to take this component and I'm going to rename it to basic button. Okay. And let's say I want a couple of buttons here instead of just one. All I have to do, instead of doing all that work again to create the button, I can just take my basic button, throw it in the project, and put it here. All right. And that way I have two buttons with only the effort of needing to create one. So that's really helpful. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some text on these buttons. So what I'm going to do is create a text box that says school. So I don't really want it to look the exact same because it's a white button. So I'm going to change the size to, let's say, 90. And then I'm also going to change the fill to red, or you can also choose whatever color you want. Now I'm going to throw that text right in the middle there. And now what I'm going to do is save some character styles. So let's say I have my title and I really like the text size and font. So I'm going to click the plus sign next to character styles. And I also really like this color and size font. So I'm going to click on plus next to the character styles. So now I have two different character styles. Okay. Now what I can do is create another text box and say activities. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about my activities. And let's say, for instance, that I mistakenly changed the font type. So that's a problem, and I want to change it back. Instead of having to go through and pick the font again, I can just click on the character style that I want, and it'll take me right back to that. So next step is to create some new artboards that tell you a little bit about me. So I'm going to click on the artboards function, and I'm going to create some new artboards. Perfect. And then I'm going to resize them. So I take note of the size of this artboard here. It's 1920 by 1080 standard screen size. And then I'm going to change this artboard so it's 1920 by 1080. So that way all your artboards are the same size. And then one other thing that you can do to kind of test out the interactivity of your buttons is you can use the preview function on the top right. So you can use a desktop preview. So I'm going to highlight this artboard that I want to take a look at, hit desktop preview. So this opens up kind of like your working model, and we can test out the hover state of the buttons that I created. So if you hover over school, it should thin out those edges, and it does. Same with the activities. So easy. And then what I want to do is create some more artboards, which I've done, and then I'm going to change the name of these artboards for simplicity's sake. So you can either go into the layers section and change that, change the artboard title, or you can double click the text and say school, enter, and activities. If I could spell it. Enter. And then I can go back to my library and get the background that I need. Align that. And then after that, and align it. So now I have my background where I want it. And now the next thing that I want to do is create some titles for my pages. Okay, so I want to create some text. So I'm going to open up a new text box and say, I go you. And then I want to create a text box that says, I picking. Make that bigger. Great. So now it doesn't really look like these really match up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my libraries. Looks like it's already open. Click on the text box that I want and go to the font types that I want just by clicking on it. So it's really helpful to be using the libraries. And now what I want to do is I want to create some content. So I want to add some pictures. So I have my library open right here. So first I'm going to talk about BU. So I'm a student at Sargent College. I'm a human physiology student. And I'm also in SPH. So I'm at the School of Public Health. I'm doing the 4+1 program, and I'm maybe going to do epidemiology and biostatistics, but I'm not sure yet. So, and then I'm going to add some content into my hiking and running section. So I'm going to grab some pictures of my hiking trips that I've done this past summer. So here's me and some friends, and I'm going to throw it in there. And then I'm also going to take a cool picture that I took and throw it in the project. And then one more picture. I like running, so I'm going to put it in. And there it is. So you can see that these artboards are a little bit cluttered. So what I want to do is I want to make it so that I can scroll. So on both of these pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my artboards, and I'm going to highlight. I'm going to use the shift command. So I'm going to click on school and activities at the same time, and I'm going to drag it down so my artboards can scroll. Right. And then what I want to do is kind of move these objects so I utilize more of the space that I just created. Great. Now, what I can do is I can preview my artboard so we can kind of see if the scrolling function worked. So if we play it, we notice that the scrolling function didn't necessarily work. So what can we do to kind of fix that? So there are a couple functions that are within the artboards that you need to make sure are working correctly. So if I highlight the school and activities sections, we need to make sure the scrolling is set to vertical and it's set to 1080 so that the viewpoint is at the very bottom of the background. So now if we preview one of these pages correctly, it should open up just that area. But if I scroll down, my background doesn't follow. So one thing that we can also do is highlight these backgrounds and click fix position when scrolling and fix position when scrolling. So now when I preview, the background should follow. Great. Okay, so now I want to customize these images a little bit. So I have the option of rounding out the edges. So let's say I want to round off these edges, so I can just bring this in. That looks really nice. And then let's say that I don't just want to round off the edges with this picture, but I want to make it kind of a circle. So I can use the cookie cutter function. So I'm going to create a circle by holding down Shift and using the ellipse function. And then I'm going to drag this right on top of me and my friends. And then I'm going to lower the opacity of this image so I can see what I'm doing. And then what I'm going to do is highlight both of these images by using the Shift, clicking on one object, holding Shift, and then clicking on the other object, and then clicking on the object, and then mask with shape. So now I have a masking group, and now I have a circular image, and that's of me and my friends. So great, that's what I wanted. And now I want to round off these edges too. Great. Now what I want to do is go through my layers function, my layers section, and make sure everything just kind of makes sense. So I'm going to change the masking group here to I also just want to rename this to nature. So I kind of know what I'm looking at in the layers function when I'm doing things, just so I can minimize the confusion. And it looks like these are all named appropriately. Okay, so now that we have a simple button and some pictures that we've customized, we can go ahead and create a home button because we need to create some interactivity to take us back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit more of a complex button. So I'm going to create a couple of things here. I'm going to take this home picture out of my library. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so it kind of fits in that corner. And I'm going to round off the edges by just squeezing that together. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is create a couple of circles. Doesn't really matter what size yet. And then I'm going to create some text that says home. And I kind of like the red text that I was using earlier, so I'm going to go back to libraries. And I'm going to click on the red 90-point font. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and make it even smaller, maybe like 50. All right. Now I'm going to take note of the size of this image. So 223 by 234. Now I'm going to make these circles the same size. So 223 by 234. 223. Now they're the same size as the home icon. So now I'm going to go into my layers section and rename these. So I have the home button picture. Now I want to move this text into the circle. So I'm going to click and then shift click, and I'm going to group it together. And I'm going to rename that home button text. then this can just stay as an ellipse because it's not really too confusing for me. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna layer these on top of each other. So this home button goes right here, and then this home text goes on top. And then this ellipse finally goes on top of all three. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the shift button to highlight all three of these things that are in the corner here. And I'm going to go to Object, Mask with Shape. And then that top ellipse goes away, and now we have a masking group. Now what I'm going to do is, keeping that highlighted, I'm going to make it a component. So now I'm going to rename it Home Button. And I'm also going to create a hover state. So now I'm going to create a little bit of a customized button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the component and into the masking group, and I'm going to rearrange a couple things. So I'm going to make it what it looks like in the default state. So I'm going to move the home button text out of the way, and I'm going to edit the home button picture's size so it's really tiny. And I'm going to put it right in the middle, and then I'm going to move the home button text right back on top. Oops. Great. And then what I'm going to do is re-highlight it and check out the hover state. So now what I think I want this button to do is I want the home button text, when I hover over it, to move out of the way left. So you can see when it's gray, you can't see it anymore. The viewer won't be able to see it. Even if you move it to the other side, they won't be able to see it because it's outside of the mask. So they won't be able to see it even if you move it right. And then I want this home button icon to kind of blow up in size when the person hovers over it. So I'm going to blow it up. And then I'm going to take a look to just make sure everything looks okay. So I go inside and I take a look at the home button picture, and it looks like it's tiny, which is good. And then I'm going to take a look at the hover state, and that looks good. So now what I can do is I can check out the home button to see if it worked. So I'm going to preview this page, and I'll check out the hover state. So that looks great. So it moves out of the way left, and then the home button kind of blows up. So that's great. And then what I'm going to do is go to the library section, and I'm going to change this to home button. I'm going to move it over here and create a new one, so I don't have to do all the work of creating another button. And now I have the exact same thing over here. Now I'm going to go to the prototype, and then I'm going to go to the hover state, and I'm going to drag this home. And I'm going to set the interaction here. So it's a trigger, the tap, transition. I'm going to change the animation to slide up, we'll say, and then I'm going to say ease in, and I'm going to make it 0.5 seconds. Now I'm going to go to this home button, and I'm going to check the hover state, and I'm going to make it go home. And I'm going to make it a transition, slide up, ease in 0.5 seconds. Great. So now it looks like they both go home. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing with the basic buttons. So now I'm in the prototype section, and I'm going to make the school go to the school page. Okay, and now it automatically does this because they're set as components in the same kind of grouping. So you can just highlight this path and hit the backspace to delete it. And I also want to customize this track. So I want to make it, let's say I want to slide left, and I want to make it ease in 0.5 seconds. Great. Now I want to check out this animation, set it to the activities, slide left, ease in 0.5 seconds. Great. Okay. Now all we have to do is see if our prototype is working. So I'm going to go to the home section, and I'm going to hit desktop preview. Now I'm going to enlarge this. You can see that our basic button kind of rounds out the edges when we're hovering. When I click on school, it gives me a little cool animation. It says I go to BU. Nice images. I can add text there if I want to, add audio, and then I can go home. And then I can also hit the activities button. I really like hiking and running. Great. And then there's some images, and it can also take me right back home. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how XD works. And this is just a few of the many capacities that Adobe XD has. You can always look up more tutorials to try to figure out cool ways to animate and create your projects. But I really hope that you guys learn a little bit of something about software design, as well as your course projects, because there's a lot to learn here and a lot to have fun with. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions, and also join my study sessions if you'd like to. I'd be more than happy to work with you. So thanks again for checking out this tutorial, and let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to working with you guys. See ya.